If you love me, please don't judge me. Got my hands tied, the power's above me. Don't shoot the messenger, I'm just a puppet here. If you wanna place blame, then look to the puppeteer. Family, fortune, envy, jealousy, privilege, passed on, legacy, secret, sabotage, borderline, felony, suicide, subtract, selfish, pedigree, yeah.
How's it going, everybody? It's C-RadTV back here with another video. So, of course, this was something I've been wanting to do for a long time. In my channel's history, I've never done a long-term project series at all until I decided now I want to go through with this series. So, for this series, I hinted at a possibility of this series. I gave some hints about it during my Darlington review when I was talking about NASCAR copying and skinning F1 alive. There was a part in that review where I mentioned that don't be surprised if NASCAR copies F1 in a few years and gets rid of the chase and goes back to a season-long points format, but it's something similar to what Formula 1 does. So with that, it did raise a question. I think a lot of fans have asked this question for a while. Would an F1-style championship format work in NASCAR in the Cup Series? Well, for this series, we're gonna go through every single season up to present day and look and see how the seasons would have fared under an F1 style points format. We're going to do this for the Cup Series, and we're going to do this for the Xfinity and the Truck Series too. So, I'll go over how long I think this series is going to be at the end of this video. So, for this video, we're going to go through 1949 to 1959, so the entire 50s, the first decade of the NASCAR Cup Series. And let me just stress out, before we get into it every season, though, let me just stress this out here. And I'm a quote iceberg here for this, because this is just a hypothetical scenario. I know everyone would have raced differently had this system been in play. This is just for fun. And before we get right into it, though, I will show here, this is the F1 points format that Formula 1 ran from 1950 to 1959, and we will use it for 1949 as well. And I know for this format, there was a bonus point for the fastest lap, but NASCAR never calculated fastest lap in the 50s, so we're not going to do a bonus point for that. I'm not going to do it for most laps led, so there will be no bonus point for fastest lap in the 50s. So the points here, that's how they are. So anyway, with all that out of the way, let's jump right in the series. So 1949, it would be only an 8-race season. This would be one of the shortest seasons in NASCAR history, of course. 8 races, so only a handful of races, so every point in every race counts. So under this format in 1949, it would come down to being a 3-man championship between Red Byron, Bob Flock, and Lee Petty. It would come down to the final race of the season, but in the finale, Red Byron would edge out Bob Flock and Lee Petty by a few points. And under this format, Red Byron would still become your inaugural Cup Series champion. The 1950 NASCAR season ended up being a battle between Curtis Turner and Dick Linder for the championship. But Curtis Turner would end up beating out Dick Linder for the championship by locking the title up with a race to go, just on the simple fact that if the title ended in a tie, Curtis Turner would have the tiebreaker. Just because Curtis Turner had a 4th place finish, while Dick Linder did not. So Curtis Turner would win a championship under this format. So within 2 seasons, we already have a different champion under this format. So 1951 would be a very close battle between the Flock brothers, Fonte and Tim Flock. Fonte taking older brother Fonte, the younger brother Tim. It will be a championship battle that goes all the way down to the wire. It would go down to the final race of the season. And after all the battling in 1951, it would pretty much end up like Tony Stewart's and Carl Edwards in 2011, where the championship would end in a tie. And the tiebreaker ended up being most wins, which Fonty Flock had 8 wins to Tim Flock's 7. So off a wins tiebreaker, Fonty Flock would win the 1951 championship over his younger brother Tim on a tiebreaker. So 1952, it would end up being a championship battle between Tim Flock and Herb Thomas. Of course, Tim Flock looking to get the championship that he lost out on a tiebreaker. Both of them are neck and neck all year, but Tim Flock was just more consistent than Herb Thomas. Tim Flock would end up locking up the championship with a race to go in the season. Herb Thomas would end up winning the season finale. But all that winning the season finale did was just make the championship look a lot closer than it was. So 1953, the championship, it was all about one man, Herb Thomas, and that Hudson Hornet of his. He just completely dominated 1953. And yeah, it wasn't even close. Like, he just flat out dominated, and Herb Thomas would end up easily cruising to his first career championship. So 1954, it would end up mainly being a two-man battle for the championship between reigning champion Herb Thomas and Lee Petty. Buck Baker, he would be in the championship for battle for the most part, but he would falter late in the season. So it ended up being Herb and Lee Petty for the championship. This one would actually go all the way down to the season finale. But in the end, Herb Thomas would edge out Lee Petty in the season finale. And Herb Thomas would lock up his second championship. So under this format, Herb Thomas would still become the first two-time champion in NASCAR history. But the one difference is that under this format, Herb Thomas would become the first driver in NASCAR history to win back-to-back championships. So 1955, it would all be about one man, Tim Flock. Tim Flock was a man on a mission in 1955, but I believe he won around close to 18 races in this season, which is insane. And since he won that many races, yeah, it's not hard to argue this one that Tim Flock, he had no competition, and he easily cruised to his second championship. So 1956, it was all about one man, Buck Baker. Like, Buck Baker, he was the most consistent driver all season in 1956. He won, I think it was close to maybe 15, 16 races, something like that. So pretty similar to Tim Flock's championship season the year prior. And even though there were a couple other drivers like Speedy Thompson and Herb Thomas were pretty consistent for the most part too, they were nowhere as close to as Buck Baker. And Buck Baker would end up easily cruising to his first career championship. Now, for the longest time in the 1957 season, it was looking like a three-man championship battle between Buck Baker, Fireball Roberts, and Marvin Panch. But then the second half of the season, Buck Baker showed why he won the championship in 1956 in dominating fashion and proceeded to dominate the second half of the season, as Fireball Roberts and Marvin Panch would have no match for Buck Baker. And the second half of the year, Buck Baker cruised to a second consecutive championship. Only difference is that under this format and timeline, Buck Baker would become the second driver in NASCAR history to win back-to-back championships. So 1958 season, it would end up being mainly a two-man battle for the championship between Lee Petty and the back-to-back reigning champion Buck Baker. Buck Baker would start to fall off late in the season. Lee Petty would remain consistent throughout the season, and Lee Petty would lock up the championship with around 2 races to go in the season. And Lee Petty would finally win the championship that he's fallen short of for so many times in the past. So Lee Petty would finally win a title in 1958 under this format. So in 1959, Lee Petty would, of course, make history winning the inaugural Daytona 500. And after that Daytona 500 win, Lee Petty would just take off and he would just straight up dominate the field all season. Just nobody had an answer for Lee Petty in 1959. And Lee Petty would end up cruising to a second consecutive championship. So Lee Petty wins his second title. And also during the seasons, Lee Petty's son, Richard Petty, would end up making his Cup Series debut in 1959. How many championships will Richard Petty win under this format? Time will tell, but for now, his father Lee gets his second title. But yeah, anyway, that's going to wrap it up here for this first part of what if NASCAR had the F1 points format system. You know, I think this would be an interesting what if theory to do. I've seen a couple vid makers do vids on NASCAR, on what if NASCAR did F1 points, but no one's ever done really a series on it. So I'm going to make this into a series. So my plan is for this series to do every single Cup season up to 2019, and then every single Xfinity season up to 2019. And then every single truck season up to 2019. And then the final part of the series, which is going to be probably like part 15 of this series, I'm going to do Cup, trucks, and Xfinity all in one in the 2020s leading up to present day. That's the plan for the series. I'm not sure how long this series is going to take. I think it's going to take the remainder of 2021. It might go into 2022. We'll have to see. It all depends on how fast I do my research and how fast I get the vids out. It also depends on my work schedule, if I'll have time to do any recordings for it or whatnot. So, yeah. I mean, I should have some time in the summer, but we'll have to see what happens. But yeah. So, really under this format, though, the only championships that really changed hands were 1950, 1951, and 1954, and the other main difference is that Herb Thomas would have been the first driver to win back-to-back championships under this format. But so far, for the most part, it's been pretty consistent for the most part to what it was in real life. But like I said, this is hypothetical and everyone would have raced differently if NASCAR had the F1 points format implemented in the 1950s. So yeah, and also only 3 championships ended up going down to the final race of the season. I think this is going to end up how the Formula 1 World Championship, F1 Championships ended up in real life, where it's very rare a championship goes down to the last race, but every time it does, we get something special. We get special moments in the sport. So yeah, anyway, that'll wrap it up here. I'll have part 2 out, whenever I get finished the research and get recording. It may take a week, it may take 2 weeks, it may take a month, who knows? You'll just have to be patient and bear with me. I'm in no rush to get this series done. It all depends on how fast I get it done. But yeah, the next part's going to be all about the Cup Series in the 60s. So yeah, anyway, that's going to wrap it up here. What do you think would have happened in the 1950s if NASCAR had F1 points implemented? Anyway, that's all I gotta say. Hope everyone has a great day, and yeah, peace. NASCAR Heavyweight Champ, out.